Good evening, welcome, thank you for coming. It's my great pleasure to welcome all of our distinguished guests, friends, and colleagues to this dedication ceremony honoring the students and faculty at the University at Buffalo School of Law and their creation of the Declaration of Equalities for Muslim Women. The Declaration of Equalities for Muslim Women is a proclamation aimed at providing Muslim women with greater legal rights and status worldwide. It was written in the spring of 2013 by law students in a course titled The Effects of Religion and Culture on Family Law in Eastern Countries, taught by then adjunct professor Nadia Shahram. This document is a list of demands and sentiments that aspire to identify and amend laws which are discriminatory, oppressive, and prejudicial towards women in many Islamic countries. It insists on reformed legislation that is consistent with equal human rights for women.
For those of us old enough to remember the tragedy of 9/11, it affected me on more levels than the average Americans. As an attorney, I had the right training to start an investigative inquiry into the faith of Islam, which quickly focused into the status of women and girls within the faith. As a woman, I thought, if there is gender equality, that is what I want to follow. At that time, I was working on my PhD from Nova University in Palm Springs, Florida. After a year of research here and 2 trips to Iran in 2004 and 2005, where I sat through family and criminal court cases, I decided to write a book about legal struggles of women in Iran and put my PhD on the back burner. It's still sitting there. What I found was that there was a disconnect between the scripture and the practitioners. Family laws were still subject to antiquated interpretation, whereas all other areas of laws had changed. In 2010, in a conference in Toronto, I came to know about a tapestry on display at the Women's Interfaith Institute in Seneca Falls, New York. It depicted Elizabeth Cady Stanton together with her contemporary Tahireh from Iran. The following Sunday, I was in Seneca Falls for the first time and met with Dr. Reverend Alison Stokes, who at that time was the director of the Interfaith Institute. After a private tour, along with another friend, the 3 of us sat for coffee, and the idea of bringing the Declaration for Muslim Women to Seneca Falls was conceived.
Thank you for this incredible moment. This is my great-great-grandmother, Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And what's interesting in this picture, she's age appropriate for the Declaration of Sentiments. So basically you can be a 30-year-old and do something significant. And very often there's a mismatch with imagery. Usually she's this old woman connected with the Declaration of Sentiments. But she's radical at 30s and radical when she's rewriting the Women's Bible, or the Bible. So what I'd like to say is that very often you look at Seneca Falls, and a lot of times it's treated like spontaneous combustion, like boom! All of a sudden women got together and they write this Declaration of Independence. And because I assume all of you have quite a law background, I think it's really important to understand, how did that happen? And I want to go back to when she's a child. And she's growing up near Albany, New York. And she grows up in a soup of law. All around her is law. So if you live in Iran, guess what? You're going to speak Persian. And if you live in Japan, guess what? You're going to speak Japanese. So if you live in a soup of law, you're going to learn the language of law. And attached to language is philosophy, words. So what is that soup of law? Her father was a judge. Her father served in Congress. Actually, their home was a law school. You didn't go to University of Buffalo. You clerked with a lawyer. And where did you live? You lived in the lawyer's house. And he had kids there. And so Elizabeth is just listening to all this. And guess what the child does? She grows up, and what does she do? She goes to Albany to, obviously she's a woman, so she can only appeal to the legislative body. And that was considered promiscuous.
Dean Aviva is the first female in the history of law school. And we are very proud to have her, and she's a feminist too.
Thank you. I'm not going to carry it. Thank you. And the intersection between women's rights and law. Please continue your education. Think about continuing here with us. The most powerful way we can change the world is through education. So thank you very much for coming here. It's my pleasure.
When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one portion of society to assume among the people of the earth a legally different position from that which they have hitherto been afforded under the laws of many nations, but one to which the passage of time, the nature of equality, and equity entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of the legal, scholarly society requires that they should insist upon the rights that impel them to such a course.
We hold these truths to be indisputable, that all society is equal and all women as members of society are worthy of the rights we here demand. Whenever any system of law becomes destructive to these ends, it is responsibility of those in the legal and scholarly community to refuse allegiance in an unjust system and insist upon the institution of a new framework laying in its foundations on such principles that will affect equality and just treatment for all of society.
Tradition and caution indeed will dictate that laws long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, history has shown that society will continue on as it always has, and the quiet voices of those oppressed will continue to be drowned out by the loud voices of their oppressors, and become accustomed to it. We here speak for women whose voices have not been heard.
We insist upon the right of self-determination for all women, to ensure her rights as an individual to make decisions for her own life are paramount. For from this right, all other rights can grow.
We insist that women have the opportunity to gain permanent custody of children subsequent to divorce, and to ensure the mother is considered an equally suitable option to create a stable family unit.
We insist that prosecution of crimes against women be swift and neutral, to ensure that women shall no longer be harmed or killed in the name of honor at the hands of their male community members.
We insist that crimes such as stoning, burning, acid pouring, and mutilation not only be illegal and punishable, but the perpetrators be publicly prosecuted by the courts.
We insist that women and girls gain greater access to education, and all attacks directed at blocking female children from attending school are prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, to ensure women have the opportunity to achieve intellectual growth and fulfillment.
We insist that restriction on women's employment be removed, to ensure women the opportunity to participate freely in their nation's economy and be afforded economic independence.
We insist upon gender-neutral inheritance rights, to ensure that women no longer statutorily inherit less than their male family members from their common ancestors.
We insist that women gain equal rights to citizenship and nationality, to ensure their status as citizens of their nation is protected as an independent individual.
We insist that women have equal rights and opportunity to end the marital relationship.
And we insist that women do not require permission to travel.
I just wanted to thank Nadia Shahram and Jamshid and the Coalition for Advancement of Muslim Students for a scholarship that they bestowed upon me. So first, I would like to start my speech by thanking Ms. Nadia Shahram and Mr. Jamshid Veffe for allowing me to express my sincere gratitude to both her and the organization of the Coalition for Advancement of Muslim Women for the scholarship award they have bestowed upon me. I feel so honored to be here today. This award is very meaningful to me, and I was very happy to learn that I was selected as the recipient for your scholarship. I am the second child in my family to be attending school at the University at Buffalo. My older sister, who also attended UB, is now a successful accountant at a private school. Like my older sister, I understand the importance of applying for scholarships in order to help me focus on academic goals once entering college and to become less worried about the price of my education. Currently, I am a biological science major, and my academic goal are working in the medical field upon graduating from University at Buffalo. Thanks to you, I am one step closer to that goal. Your generosity has inspired me to help others and give back to the community. I will never forget the amount of assistance you provided me by presenting me with this scholarship. You have also motivated me by showing me that there are people out there rooting for me. As students, we are aware that college can be very expensive, and it's comforting to know that there are organizations like Nadia's that empower females to get an education and not allow anything to stand in their way. As we celebrate International Women's Day today, I'm happy to thank Nadia Shahram for allowing women to continue making new achievements every day. Thank you.
How did we start the Coalition for Advancement of Muslim Women? We started the coalition with the purpose of developing policies, legislations, and strategies that promote advancement of Muslim women in all realms of society. We set our priorities on equity, justice, self-determination, and economic empowerment. Our goal was to create a coalition of professional women in areas such as medicine, law, social work, education, business, and health, and to have them work locally with Muslim women and families. Because of the greater need for independence and autonomy among refugee mothers and daughters, we have placed economic empowerment as our #1 priority and began implementing our mission through education and other services. We have an ongoing partnership with City Mattress to give mattresses and box spring to refugees. So far, we have distributed close to 150 mattresses. We started a sewing machine project and collected 15 sewing machines with the goal of collecting more and forming a sewing center where refugees can produce items for sale with all profits going directly to them. We are continually looking for partnership with companies to offer essential products at no cost to refugees. Starting last March and every March here on, we celebrate Nowruz, or New Year event, which is known as the arrival of spring and celebrated among many countries where our refugees and immigrant families are from. It is a celebration of heritage, culture, and community through dancing, singing, music, food, and poetry. Our next event is coming up on March 25th to welcome immigrants and refugees to our community while celebrating diversity. We are still working behind the scenes to change regulations and policies harmful to Muslim women right here in Buffalo. And here is Dr. Aziza Karimi.
On behalf of Coalition for Advancement of Muslim Women, I like to express our thoughts on women and education. Over the past few years, we have come to realize the importance of education to empower women to challenge the patriarchal ideology, to put an end to women's subordination, transforming the structure of institutions that reinforce and promote gender discrimination, and to end social inequality. We think that education is a liberating force for women in general and especially for Muslim women. 3 years ago, we began the scholarship program for higher education of Muslim women. We are proud to say that we have supported the educational dreams of 3 ambitious, young, and bright women. One of them is here with us today. You heard from her, Ms. Aya Imran. We offer $4,000 scholarship towards an undergraduate degree, and we will be starting a graduate scholarship program at the beginning of next academic year. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
One of the committees that is very active is called Sisters Committee, and I'm going to now ask our MC for today, Mackenzie Hafner, to come here. She's a very active member of Sisters Committee, and I see that among those who are sitting there, we do have few members. I would like to ask, we have Sujata. Sujata is one of our members. Would you please stand up, Sujata? One of members of our Sisters Committee. And of course, we have Professor Cady right there, who is very active between the Coalition for Advancement of Muslim Women. Now, here you are.
My name is Mackenzie Hafner. I started and currently lead the women's group at Journey's End Refugee Services, a local resettlement agency here in Buffalo. I joined the Sisters Committee in 2016. I humbly invite you, our honored guests, to join me and many others in our Sisters Committee as we counsel, teach, support, and encourage our less privileged sisters and their daughters. A sewing machine can be an agent of change for a seamstress. A scholarship can be an agent of change for a striving young mind, and a simple question such as, how are you, how are things going, can do so much good. The possibilities are endless, and every outreached hand will help them rise. On behalf of the Sisters Committee, I thank you.
When I was about 7 years old, growing up in Iran, in Burujet, which is 6,426 kilometers, give or take few hundred, from where I'm standing today. Thursdays were special to my sisters and me. Right after school, my sisters and I would walk to my precious maternal grandparents' house for lunch. They lived not far from our school, only by their standard, about 4 miles. You see, Thursday at noon was the beginning of the weekend in Iran. After lunch, as we settled in with our homework, I remember vividly that grandfather would take long nap in the adjacent room, but my grandmother always received female guests. As soon as grandfather's head would hit the pillow and his eyes were closed, a fresh teapot in the making with homemade walnut cookies next to the teapot and the table. We were always allowed to stay and continue with our homework. What fascinated me, as young as I was that several women arrived one after another shortly and took seat on the handmade rug around the room. Sometimes conversations was held in a whisper with grandmother, but sometimes it was more of a discussion. It usually involved monetary and domestic violence grievances from her female friends who needed to borrow money from grandmother to make a business transaction without the knowledge of their husbands or their fathers. Every so often, my grandmother would reach out and lift the closest corner of the handmade rug and produce a neat stack of bills. I used to think my grandmother was a magician who could make money appear from under the rug. As these friends would share their stories, I not only listened with my 6-year-old ears, the ones on each side of my head, I learned to listen with my ears in my heart. I would watch grandma's eyes wailing. Her hand would caress her friend's hand so lovingly, but she remained quiet and observant. These stories were common throughout the early years in Iran as the daughter and granddaughter of the most selfless, loving, compassionate, and wise women. Upon their strong framework and foundation of caring for those who have less by empowering them to be self-sufficient, I am driven in my own life to continue their legacy of service to our sisters. In the words of dear Mother Teresa, it is not the magnitude of our action, but the amount of love that is put into them that matters. Fast forward. During my studies of law here at the University of Buffalo School of Law, I discovered the infinite possibilities I had learned from my mother and my grandmothers had returned to me, and I was able to concentrate on the purpose of my legal studies with acute awareness of the transformative power of change. The life of the mind requires community and loving support from colleagues and friends. Much like Professor Sue Mangel, much like Professor Sue Tompkins, and much like my dear Professor Isabel Marcus. I became the activist that my mother and grandmothers could not become because of the location and patriarchal culture into which they were born. Both my parents emphasized the importance of education as the secret that separates mere existence from a better life, life which is thriving and speaking out. I learned through legal education. I learned from reading about Masters of Change for Women's Advancements, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who spoke about gender equality and gathered assemblies of women when such gatherings were forbidden and unheard of. I learned from Iranian women like Tahireh, who removed her scarf in an assembly for men only, in defiance of man's law of not allowing women into assemblies. My grandmother knew well that economic independence for women was the major step towards reducing domestic violence. My mother knew that setting up a beauty school and providing licensing for young women gave them some economic power, which resulted in having a say in their future husband's choice. I learned by striving to shape history and refusing to let history to shape and change me. Through our founding mothers, I saw a heartbeat of civic community. For the last 2 years, we have marched on the streets of Buffalo, Seneca Falls, Washington, D.C. And wherever there is a need of defiance to inequality and injustice, an ongoing revolution, not in arms, but in mind and in our hearts, which is far more pervasive and powerful. Together we can propel regime and policy changes right here in our own land of the free. I so clearly still hear the sound of my paternal grandmother, who used to tell stories in the form of poetry from Shahnameh, the epic of Iranian kings. She used to talk of bravery of women in battlefields as head of states and as lawmakers. Remembering all the stories from my mother and grandmothers and the stories that I heard in my childhood has been a cellular change in my mind and my body. I ask you, to ask yourself, what is your purpose? What is your purpose? My purpose has been to build a community so everyone has the opportunity for a quality life. It is up to us to create a higher sense of purpose to move forward. Maya Angelou said, when you learn, you teach. When you get, you give. You do not get what you hope for, but what you believe. And it is your belief that will create action. I am making conscious decisions. I know that global education and change starts locally. 2016-2017, we had about 1,900 refugees resettling here. The Coalition for the Advancement of Muslim Women was formed with the intention to help to empower through education one of our most vulnerable communities here in Western New York, the refugees and immigrants. If you believe that education is the base for understanding, compassion, human dignity, and gender equality, and if you believe that through education we have a much better chance to eliminate poverty, and if you believe that education is a right and not a privilege, and it is a right that through that you can take advantage of all other rights, then please help the Coalition for the Advancement of Muslim Women to establish yet another scholarship right here at the law school. Thank you.
Yeah.
Stay.
Thank you.
Stay. Yes. There we go. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you again. I'm sorry. You're working on the library. Okay.
We did some charges. Grace.
I saw it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'll buy one.
Yeah, me too. I already have one.
Fabulous book. The Red Tent Book Club in Seneca Falls read it. This is a new edition of it.
The lady with the black and white shirt is collecting money.
Nadia, your son
I want to go to
Yes, I was there. So was my husband.
Yeah, some of the first ones. My husband was there.